Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mitapad Paramahansa Parivajikacharya Ashtotar that Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. ISKCON BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Om Mitapad Parivajikacharya Ashtotar that Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada All glory to Sri Guru and Guru.
like a steam coming in.
Please, try to... We got some fresh air. It's all fresh now. Hare Krishna. All right. Oh. All right, give me a second here. You probably had air conditioning all day, right? Yeah, and I didn't. This is the only air conditioning I've had all day. I'm hot. You too. You're outnumbered, outvoted. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Okay. On the 5th day of September, 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad-gītā as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 6 entitled Dhyana-yoga. And I don't think Tapas is with us tonight. Tapas, you there? He's in India, but he's...
Hare Krishna, Tapas is not online.
Okay, do you know the verse?
I don't.
Okay. All right. I think it's 20. I think it's 14. 13. Well, maybe not. No, I think we did that one. Such an important verse. Yeah, we did 14. 15, we did 13, 14? Yeah, it's got to be 15. 15.
Yeah.
It's 15 for sure. Okay. Dhyana-yoga, chapter 6, text number 15, the bottom of page 269. Yunjan evam sadatmanam yogi niyatamanasah shantim nirvana paramam matsangstam adhigacchati yunjan evam sadatmanam yogi niyatamanasah shantim nirvana paramam matsangstam adhigacchati yunjan evam sadatmanam yogi niyatamanasah shantim nirvana paramam matsangstam adhigacchati yunjan evam sadatmanam yogi niyatamanasah shantim nirvana paramam matsangstam adhigacchati yunjan evam sadatmanam yogi niyatamanasah shantim nirvana paramam matsangstam adhigacchati. Anyone on Zoom?
Yunjan evam sadatmanam.
Yunjan evam sadatmanam.
Yogi niyatamanasah.
Yogi niyatamanasah.
Shantim nirvana paramam.
Shantim nirvana paramam.
Matsangstam adhigacchati.
Matsangstam adhigacchati. Word by words. Yunjan practicing, evam as mentioned above. Sada constantly, atmanam body, mind and soul. Yogi the mystic transcendentalist. Niyatamanasah with a regulated mind. Shantim peace. Nirvana paramam cessation of material existence. Matsangstam the spiritual sky, the kingdom of God. Adhigacchati does attain. Translation. Thus, practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist, his mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of God, or the abode of Krishna, by cessation of material existence. Purport. The ultimate goal in practicing yoga is now clearly explained. Yoga practice is not meant for attaining any kind of material facility. It is to enable the cessation of all material existence. One who seeks an improvement in health or aspires for material perfection is no yogi according to the Bhagavad-gītā. Nor does cessation of material existence entail one's entering into, quote, the void, which is only a myth. There is no void anywhere within the creation of the Lord. Rather, the cessation of material existence enables one to enter into the spiritual sky, the abode of the Lord. The abode of the Lord is also clearly described in the Bhagavad-gītā as that place where there is no need of sun, moon, or electricity. All the planets in the spiritual kingdom are self-illuminated like the sun in the material sky. The kingdom of God is everywhere, but the spiritual sky and the planets thereof are called Param Dhamma, or superior abodes. A consummate yogi, who is perfect in understanding Lord Krishna, as is clearly stated herein by the Lord himself, mat chitta, mat para, mat sthanam, can attain real peace and can ultimately reach his supreme abode, Krishna Loka, known as Goloka Vrindavan. In the Brahma Samhita 537, it is clearly stated, Goloka eva navasatya kilatma bhutaha. The Lord, although residing always in his abode called Goloka, is the all-pervading Brahman and the localized Paramatma as well by dint of his superior spiritual energies. No one can reach the spiritual sky, Vaikuntha, or enter into the Lord's eternal abode, Goloka Vrindavan, without the proper understanding of Krishna and his plenary expansion, Vishnu. Therefore, a person working in Krishna consciousness is the perfect yogi, because his mind is always absorbed in Krishna's activities. Savai Mana Krishna Padata Bindayoho. In the Vedas also, Shvetashvatara Upanishad 3.8, we learn Tameva Vididvati Mrityum Eti. One can overcome the path of birth and death only by understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. In other words, perfection of the yoga system is the attainment of freedom from material existence and not some magical jugglery or gymnastic feats to befool innocent people. Om Jnanatimrandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmiditam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So, in this verse, Krishna definitely mentions Matsang Stam, the abode of Krishna, the kingdom of God, or Krishna's own abode, as the goal of the yoga practice. So, even though this is Ashtanga Yoga that Krishna is outlining here, still the same goal is there as in Bhakti Yoga. The only difference is that Bhakti Yoga is much more practical for us, because it can be practiced even in the middle of one's ordinary life. You don't have to make any radical change in your life, really. I mean, you have to do some things, obviously, but it's not as uprooting and as radical as the Ashtanga Yogi. You're familiar, I'm sure, with the conversation between Lord Chaitanya and Ramananda Roy in the 8th chapter of Madhya Lila. So this is very telling. I mean, these are very advanced conversations, and they go from beginning bhakti all the way to the highest levels of Gopi Bhava. But at one point, Lord Chaitanya is taking the role of the student, and Ramananda Roy is taking the role of the guru. He was reluctant to do that at first. Ramananda Roy, naturally, here's Lord Chaitanya, who he knew was the Supreme Lord. But Lord Chaitanya encouraged him, Kiba vipra, kiba nasi shuddha ke nenoi, ye Krishna tattva vita se guru hoy. It's a famous verse. Why not, whether one is a Brahmin or a sannyasi or a Shudra whoever knows the science of bhakti can become a spiritual master. Of course, knowing the science of bhakti means knowing it thoroughly, both jnana and vijnana, and being able to expound upon it and give it and live it. So, in the course of asking the questions, Ramananda Roy started to give, what is the ultimate goal of life and how to achieve it. This is usually the standard sadhya and sadhana. So he begins describing varnashram, and Lord says, well, that's external. And then he goes up in various things. He even comes to sarvadharma parityajya. Lord says, and that's external. Brahmabhuta person, that's external. But the first thing he accepted, as he went beyond this, but the first thing he accepted, this is all right, now go on. And that was this verse from Lord Brahma's prayers to Krishna in the 14th chapter of the 10th canto, after the Brahma Vimohan Lila. And Lord Brahma says, right near the beginning of his prayers, he says, Dhyane priyasam udapasya namanta eva, jivanti san mukaditam bhavadiya vartam, stane stita shrutigatam tanuvan manobe ye prayaso ajitatito pasitaistri lokyam. So what that means is, Jnana priyasam, give up the very difficult process of trying to speculate and understand the Lord by Dhyana-yoga. Jnana priyasam. Throw it away, udapasya. And surrender unto the realized soul and just hear from him. Udapasya namanta eva, jivanti san, live in this way. San mukaditam, san means the sat or the sadhus, the devotees. Mukaditam bhavadiya vartam. What are they speaking? News about you. They're speaking Krishna Katha. Bhavadiya is your. And then sthanasitak, stay in your own position, but add this element. Shrutigatam, follow this path of hearing. And then comes the key phrase, Tanuvan manobir. Now you're approaching these sound vibrations not just as a dilettante, hearing once a week or even once a day, but you're hearing them, they're entering, and you're serving them with your body, your mind, and your words. With your body and senses, you're serving by acting as is prescribed, and not acting as not prescribed. With your mind, you're contemplating and thinking of all of the instructions and how to implement them. And with your words, you're repeating them. So if you follow this path, then te prayasho, for the most part, this is the only way to conquer ajita. Ajita is the name for Krishna, means unconquerable. But it is jita icha ajita. Jita ajita. This way you conquer ajita. How? By developing love. He only surrenders, surrenders to one who is in love for him. So you can develop love by this simple process. So how much more simple that is and practical than this very technical process of artificially controlling the mind. I mean, it's not a bad practice. It works, but it's very difficult in this age. It's meant for Satya Yuga, basically. And as we'll see, Arjuna rejects it. He says, no, Chantala Vimana Krishna Pramati, but my mind is too obstinate, too powerful. It's like trying to control. Tasyaham nigraham manye vayu eva sadushka. Difficult to let them control the wind, So then they go back and forth. Arjuna doesn't think he can make it. Krishna says, yes, you can do it with practice. What if I fail? Then you can take birth in the Suchinam Shimatam Gehe. Okay, but in the end, Krishna says, don't worry, yogi nama bisarvesham. The best yogi is the one who's always thinking of me with great faith and love, and that's you. So, but there are many good instructions here. So thus practice constant control of the body, mind, and activities. The mystic transcendentalist, his mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of God by cessation of material existence. So Prabhupada is, these purports really resonate with me because I used to listen again and again to this yoga systems. Have you seen it? There's a series of tapes called the Yoga System tapes. And Prabhupada is speaking on this chapter. There's also some other lectures at the end of it where he's speaking from the 8th chapter. There's also something about meditation there. But mostly he goes through this whole chapter. And so whenever I read these purports, I've been thinking of Prabhupada's voice, on that, because someone is reading this to him. So first thing he says here is that yoga is not meant for any contained material facility. One who seeks improvement in health or aspires after material perfection is no yogi, according to Bhagavad Gita. Well, that's why I started yoga, to try to improve my health. I wasn't so much interested in becoming a yogi. I just wanted to use the yoga process to help my, which it did. And I was fortunate because in the process of doing that, I also came in touch with mantras and the philosophy, you know. So it started my whole search. And this is, many devotees in America, you know, came in that way. The idea of a void, this is a Buddhistic idea. This is because the word nirvana is here, right? Brahma nirvana. Nirvana paramam, the supreme nirvana. Prabhupada would often say, what is nirvana? Nirvana means finished. Your material life is finished. You know? It's not merging into the void, which is this Buddhist thing. You know, there's no void anywhere in this existence. Krishna is all pervading. And then what does he say about it's only a myth into the void? Cessation of material existence enables one to enter the spiritual sky. So nirvana is he's describing here, means no more material thoughts or activities, and you know, everything can become in relation to Krishna. Like a perfect example of a yogi, a bhakti yogi, who is completely linked to Krishna in samadhi is this Ambarish, King Ambarish. Savaimana Krishna Padada Bindayo Vajangsi. You know, his mind placed on the lotus feet of Krishna, his words he used to glorify Krishna, his hands he used to clean the temple. Everything's engaged. Very wonderful example. But he was a king. He wasn't a yogi, you know, he wasn't that, it was practical. Consummate yogi, beginning in Bhagavad, perfect in understanding Krishna. Stated here by the Lord himself. When he says herein, he doesn't mean here in this chapter even. Mat chitta, mat para, mat stanam. It was mat sangstam, I think Prabhupada is thinking of, which is in this verse. Same idea, the spiritual sky. But mat chitta comes in, and that particular phrase comes in the 10th chapter. But the whole idea is that Krishna is the object of it. Whether you're doing karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, bhakti yoga, Krishna has to be the goal, and he has to be the object. Otherwise, you're deviating. You're not going to achieve the goal. Go back to Godhead. Let's see. Then he quotes from Brahma Samhita, Goloka Akilatma Bhuta. So Krishna's in Goloka, but he's also in every atom. He's in everyone's heart also. Okay. Yeah, Prabhupada quotes from this these description of Ambarish here. Savaimana Krishna Vadada Vindiya. Okay. Any questions on this verse? Now Krishna is going to give some very practical instructions, which we can take to heart. Nat yashnatas tu yogosti.
Nat yashnatas tu yogosti.
Nachaikanta manashnataha.
Nachakanta anasrata samata.
Nachati swapna shilasya.
Nachati swapna shilasya.
Jagato naivacharjuna.
Jagato naivacharjuna.
There's no possibility of one becoming a yogi, O Arjun, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. Purport. Regulation of diet and sleep is recommended here for the yogis. Too much eating means eating more than is required to keep the body and soul together. There's no need for men to eat animals because there is an ample supply of grains, vegetables, fruits, and milk. Such simple foodstuff is considered to be in the mode of goodness, according to the Bhagavad-gītā. Animal food is for those in the mode of ignorance. Therefore, those who indulge in animal food, drinking, smoking, and eating food which is not offered to Krishna, not first offered to Krishna, will suffer sinful reactions because of eating only polluted things. Bundate dvagam papa ye prachantyatma karanat. Anyone who eats for sense pleasure or cooks for himself, not offering his food to Krishna, eats only sin. One who eats sin and eats more than is allotted to him cannot execute perfect yoga. It is best that one eat only the remnants of foodstuff offered to Krishna. A person in Krishna consciousness does not eat anything which is not first offered to Krishna. Therefore, only the Krishna conscious person can attain perfection in yoga practice. Nor can one who artificially abstains from eating, manufacturing his own personal process of fasting, practice yoga. The Krishna conscious person observes fasting as it is recommended in the scriptures. He does not fast or eat more than is required. and he is thus competent to perform yoga practice. One who eats more than required will dream very much while sleeping, and he must consequently sleep more than is required. One should not sleep more than 6 hours daily. One who sleeps more than 6 hours out of 24 is certainly influenced by the mode of ignorance. A person in the mode of ignorance is lazy and prone to sleep a great deal. Such a person cannot perform yoga. So it's very practical instruction. We get the same thing from Rupa Goswami in his Upadeshamrita. The second verse, Atyahara priyasascha prajalbo niyamagra. Janasangastalawing shadbhi bhakti pranashyati. This is the way to destroy the bhakti. The first one is overeating, overcollecting, and working very hard for material things, priyasascha, talking nonsense, listen to nonsense talk. Niyamagraha, that has two meanings. One is failing to observe the rules and regulations of bhakti, or going through the motions. You're there physically, your mind is elsewhere, you really don't have any heart in it. When I hear that, I say, because you see people like that sometimes in the old days. So oftentimes someone would come and he would join, he would stay over or something, but he wouldn't really join the ashram, or even if he did, he had other agendas, And so he couldn't give himself really to the program, although he may be there physically. This is niyamagraha. Janasanga, bad association with ordinary people, and laulyam, which is ardent desire. Even if you don't do anything, if you maintain a great desire for material things, that's a great impediment. So these 6, or rather 8, things will destroy the devotional service. So the same thing is here. There has to be regulation. Otherwise you become very much on the bodily concept of life. You're sleeping too much, you're eating too much, So, but Krishna consciousness, the program is there for regulation. Everything regulated. The idea is that the mind has to be peaceful in order to meditate or do anything, and even perform bhakti yoga. The same has to be. Okay. So then he reiterates this, next verse. Yuktahara viharasya yukta chestasya karmasu yukta swapnavabhudasya yogo bhavati dukkhaha. He who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. Extravagance in the matter of eating, sleeping, defending, and mating, which are demands of the body, can block advancement in the practice of yoga. Now, just before we read the rest of this purport, because this word vihara, what do we have? Nidrahara viharakadi vijito. This is in the Goswamashtika. That's one of the verses. Nidrahara viharakadi vijito chatyanta dino chayo. So they conquered over sleep, eating, and recreation, but Prabhupada says that recreation is sex life. They can, so I think that's mentioned here. That's even though it's not in the recreation, but it becomes mating. Prabhupada's talking about eating, sleeping, mating in the purport. So I think that's what that refers to. As far as eating is concerned, it can be regulated only when one is practiced to take and accept prasadam. He's reiterating from last verse, sanctified food. Lord Krishna is offered, according to the Bhagavad-gītā 9.26, vegetables, flowers, fruits, grains, milk, etc. In this way, a person in Krishna consciousness becomes automatically trained not to accept food not meant for human consumption, or not in the category of goodness. As far as sleeping is concerned, a Krishna conscious person is always alert in the discharge of his duties in Krishna consciousness, and therefore any unnecessary time spent sleeping is considered a great loss. Avyarta kalatvam. A Krishna conscious person cannot bear to pass a minute of his life without being engaged in the service of the Lord. Now I forget if this is one of the 26 qualities, or it's one of the 8 that are the symptoms of ecstasy that are given in the CC. But this is a famous phrase, not wasting any time. Cannot bear to pass a moment without engaging in the service of the Lord. Therefore his sleeping is kept to a minimum. His ideal in this respect is Srila Rupa Goswami, who was always engaged in the service of Krishna and who could not sleep more than 2 hours a day, and sometimes not even that. Thakur Haridas would not even accept prasadam, nor even sleep for a moment, without finishing his daily routine of chanting with his beads 300,000 names. As far as work is concerned, a Krishna-conscious person does not do anything which is not connected with Krishna's interest, and thus his work is always regulated and is untainted by sense gratification. Since there is no question of sense gratification, there is no material leisure for a person in Krishna consciousness. And because he is regulated in all his work, speech, sleep, wakefulness, and all other bodily activities, there's no material misery for him. So, yeah, that's the end. Yogo bhavati dukkhaha. It removes all pains. So this is the challenge that we have, because living in this society, whatever whatever you can do, do it. In other words, the idea of this kind of regulation in one's life is just not even in the the ether. No one knows about it. I mean, there are people who go through extreme regimens of regulation, athletes, to become champion athletes, to really diet regulation, but they're not yogis, because the goal is material. Oh, I'll win this prize, I'll be highly honored and so forth. But the same kind of regulation can be there, but there's no consciousness of what you eat has to be sanctified and all that. It's material, modes of nature. So this, we were discussing this in the morning class. Ignorance is the source of all the problems. That underlie, it is mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion, that the source of sin is ignorance. If someone really knew, the kind of punishments that await you for these activities that are mentioned in the 26th chapter of the 5th canto, we're almost finished with the chapter. There's just a sampling of the different hells, and each one is like more horrible than the next, And so someone would, and they're real. They may be taking place on the subtle platform, but they're as real as anything. You're feeling like you're again and again being tormented, years and years, millions of years. So how could you very nonchalantly perform these horrific sins of illicit sex and eating meat and let's go to the restaurant. I grew up. I told this. I don't think you'd be, because you don't come in the morning class. But a few weeks ago I mentioned I grew up near New York City, and I would go in there, sometimes go to museums and things, like that. And I would walk by, and there's these supposedly high-class restaurants in New York, and right in the window, they would sometimes have a fish tank, and in that fish tank are these live lobsters. It says, "Oh, you see how fresh the lobsters are for you. As soon as you order a lobster, we pull these guys out and we put them into the oil." That's directly one of the hells. Did you ever read it, Fifth Canto? The person who does that, who cooks it, the person who eats it, the person who buys it, they're all headed for getting boiled in oil. So it's much easier to just reject it all. Oh, that's all mythology, You live and you die, and in the middle try to enjoy as much as you can. That's such ignorance. That's tragic. So Prabhupada's mission, is try to save people from this ignorance leading to great suffering. And enjoying the fruits of his incredible effort right now, this Bhagavad-gītā, so many books, the society as a whole, trying to push back the forces of Kali, which are, just overwhelming everything, and show by example, and give the philosophy of how one can live a different kind of life and enjoy the happiness within, illumined within, aiming within. We had the last chapter. Brahma Nirvana was spoken of a lot. All right, we're going to have these verses about Ambarish right here in the next purport. Let's try it. Yada viniyatam chittam atmanyevavatishtate nishpriha sarvakamebhyo yukta ityuchyate tada. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga. Purport. The activities of the yogi are distinguished from those of an ordinary person by his characteristic cessation from all kinds of material desires, of which sex is the chief. A perfect yogi is so well disciplined in the activities of the mind that he can no longer be disturbed by any kind of material desire. This perfectional stage can automatically be attained by persons in Krishna consciousness, as stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam 9:4-18-20. All right, I'll say you say you can. Savai mana Krishna padara bindayo but vachangsi vaikunta gunanu varnane karo hare mandira marjanarishu Shrutim chakarat chuta satkatho daye Mukunda lingalaya darshane dvishao Tadbritya gatra sparshinga sangamam Granam cha tatpara saroja saurabhe Shrimat tulasya rasanang tadarpite Pado hare cheta badanu sarpane Shiro rishikesh badabi bandane Kamam chadase natu kama kameya Yatottama shloka janashraya ratihi. King Ambarish first of all engaged his mind on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Then, one after another, he engaged his words in describing the transcendental qualities of the Lord, his hands in mopping the temple of the Lord, his ears in hearing of the activities of the Lord, his eyes in seeing the transcendental forms of the Lord, his body in touching the bodies of the devotees, his sense of smell in smelling the scents of the lotus flowers offered to the Lord, his tongue in tasting the tulsi leaf offered at the lotus feet of the Lord, his legs in going to places of pilgrimage and the temple of the Lord, his head in offering obeisances unto the Lord, and his desires in executing the mission of the Lord. All these transcendental activities are quite befitting a pure devotee. This transcendental stage may be inexpressible subjectively by the followers of the impersonalist path, but it becomes very easy and practical for a person in Krishna consciousness, as is apparent in the above description of the engagements of Maharaj Ambarish. Unless the mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord by constant remembrance, such transcendental engagements are not practical. In the devotional service of the Lord, therefore, these prescribed activities are called archana, or engaging all the senses in the service of the Lord. The senses and the mind require engagements. Simple abnegation is not practical. Therefore, for people in general, especially those who are not in the renounced order of life, transcendental engagement of the senses and the mind, as described above, is the perfect process for transcendental achievement, which is called yukta in the Bhagavad-gītā. Hare Krishna. Welcome. So this is the wonderful verse of verses describing Ambarish. And one of the points of describing him so thoroughly in the Bhagavatam is because he wasn't a yogi, he wasn't out and performing severe austerities and penances. He was a king. But he took the opportunity to engage each of his faculties in connection with Krishna. And therefore, everything he did was saturated with Krishna consciousness. And he was a great example and for his subjects and also for everyone else. And then, of course, there was the adventure of the confrontation with, it wasn't Vishwamitra, it was Durvasa. Do you know what Durvasa means? Describing him? I thought it meant his clothes are far away, so he's naked. But that's not at all what it means. He's such a he can get very angry, like, you know, he's like, just like Butch, he can get very angry or he can get very favorable. Just like he favored, I think both Draupadi and Kunti, I think, you know, favorable. Or maybe Kunti got another. Draupadi for sure, yeah. And, you know, she cooked for him and everything, so he blessed her that you can feed as many people as possible, you need to, but only before you eat. If you eat, then you can't do it. So there's a whole pastime around it. But for Ambarish, he became very jealous, envious, because here he is, this big yogi with so many thousands of disciples, mystic powers and everything. And Ambarish is getting all the honor because he's such a wonderful devotee, and he's, you know, leading this kingdom in this way. So, you know the story. Some of you know it. You may not know it as well. And there may be someone out there that doesn't know it. So I'll tell it again. So Ambarish was a very strict follower of Ekadashi. And that means, it's like we say every morning, but, you know, Maharaj is saying, yeah, you know, the intervals. I remember one time we had an interval. It was like 10 seconds between, you know, the break fast and me. So we filled, I said, all right, everyone come out there, we're going to get little cups of halva. Or I'll have a cup of halva and I'll give you, you know. And then, of course, a lot of people, you know, they couldn't make it. You know, in other words, it was impossible. And we'll just pray for forgiveness for having, you know, got it. But he was serious about it. So this Durvasa, he arrived. I think he was just alone. He didn't have a disciple, but he arrived a few minutes before the time for breakfast. And so Ambarish, you know, this is a Brahmin, a great Brahmin. He's a Kshatriya, so he was very solicitous and welcomed him. And would you like to join me in breaking the Ekadashi fast? You know, this is Dwadashi. Says Durvasa says, yes, of course, but just let me bathe first. You know, which is the way to do it. You come from a trip, you should bathe before taking prasad. So he purposely stayed in the water for a long time until he knew that Ambarish would be in anxiety because the time was expiring when he could break the fast most auspiciously. So he consulted his Brahmin council. They really couldn't help him, and he had an idea. He said, well, I'll just drink some water. That's breaking and not breaking. And Durvasa, you know, he's such a great yogi, he's not going to take offense at that, you know. So he did. He took some water. And therefore he broke fast, you know, because it's also breaking in the right. And then, you know, Durvasa came and he said, well, okay, we're ready to break fast. But he could tell by his mystic power that he'd already drank some water. So he completely overreacted. This was his plan, you know. But what was he going to do? He's going to burn Ambarish to ashes for this horrible offense of drinking water. So he created this Kritya. I looked this up. There's a female, this fiery demoness. There's one of the classes of demons and demonesses, witches and everything. So he creates this, and suddenly she's burning and she's heading for Ambarish. He doesn't flinch. He just keeps chanting Hare Krishna or whatever, you know. But he was such a wonderful devotee that Krishna, I remember reading this, that he had already donated his chakra to him. In other words, he had the facility to use it. He didn't invoke it, but the chakra himself annihilated the Kritya and then went after Durvasa. Now Durvasa at that point could have just said, take me, Hare Krishna, good, Hare, because to be killed by the chakras, you know, but he wasn't so advanced, you know. He was scared. So he started running, meaning that he's traveling with his mystic power. He goes to Shiva, who he was a devotee of, says, what can I do? You got the Krishna's chakra after, you know. So he goes to Brahma. Brahma says the same thing. Finally, he goes to Vaikuntha. I think he went to the Dhruvaloka Vaikuntha. And he falls down and offers obeisance to Narayan, Lord Narayan, and he begged him to please withdraw your chakra. And Narayan said, I forget the Sanskrit, it's a famous line, that I'm not independent. I'm dependent on my devotees, you know. I don't know anything but them, they don't know anything but me. You know, the famous line, they're in my heart, I'm in their heart. If you want to be saved, you have to go back down to Ambarish and surrender unto him and get his mercy and blessing. So he ran, you know, flew, whatever. And he offers, there's a wonderful painting of him offering dandavats to Ambarish. And Ambarish, he just prayed to the chakra, you know, please let him, you know, the chakra said, okay, you know. So who had the greatest mystic power? Obviously Ambarish did. just by being a great devotee. Prabhupada would sometimes show those things, you know. There's these stories. I mean, this is a little indication, but it shows Prabhupada was supernatural. There's one devotee describes that he was on a morning walk with Prabhupada. I forget where it was in some park. And it was early morning, and it was dew on somehow they were walking on the grass itself. And so all the devotees were around Prabhupada, and you know, they're making impressions in the grass because it was moist. So so this devotee wanted to get the dust, you know, from Prabhupada's. I mean, he's looking at Prabhupada. Prabhupada is not making any impressions in the grass. He's walking there, but there's nothing there. He was, and it wasn't that he, you know, he was so light. This is another devotee. This was in Melbourne. They started out. Melbourne was an amazing place. Probably the first place he went when he went to Australia. He went several times, but first trip he went to Melbourne. They had an established temple, but everyone was very new. You know, the old devotees had been in the movement for 3 months. You know, and there were a whole bunch of people who've been there for 2 weeks. You know, but Prabhupada was installing deities, and they needed Brahmins. So he took some of these 2-week devotees, and he gave them double initiation, and they were Brahmins. And so Prabhupada prays to the deities. It's very famous. He says, I'm placing them in. I'm placing you in their hands. Please give them the inspiration to properly take care of you. So he came back a year later. Something in the temple had developed, and the puja is going on very nicely. You know, so and then when he came back the last trip, they had bought a piece of land, and they built a beautiful house for Srila Prabhupada, a 2-story house, and it was very opulent. It's shown on this following Srila Prabhupada. You know, so this devotee is telling a story how in this house Prabhupada's bedroom was on the upper story. It was on the 2nd floor. And there was a stairway. But sometimes Prabhupada, you know, his health wasn't that great in 76 when he came, you know. So they assigned one devotee, you know, Prabhupada would say stout and strong, to carry him up the stairs. They didn't have, you know, a palanquin or anything. They physically carried Prabhupada. So this is a wonderful service. So time came for Prabhupada to go upstairs, and he got in the devotee's arms, and, you know, he went up. Practically, Prabhupada had hardly any weight at all. He felt any weight with his power. It wasn't like it was 100 pounds or anything, maybe 5 pounds, 10 pounds. Yeah. So this is, you know, mystic, you know, power. Prabhupada wasn't exercising it, but he just naturally had it. And many devotees would describe how, you know, Prabhupada, he would look at them, and they would feel that he was looking into them, and he knew everything about them, you know. You know, it was quite an experience to understand, oh, Prabhupada knows everything, you know, and they would be inspired, oh, I really have to be strict and like that. So Prabhupada, you know, once said that by the Mahabhagavad, they have these powers, these mystic powers, but they don't use them. Because you can imagine what would happen, is that the followers, suddenly you'd have a lot of followers, but they wouldn't be wanting to learn bhakti from him. You know, they've been wanting to learn this from him. That's not what you need. We need people who, you know. So this is the perfect example. This Maharaj Ambarish, who had, you know, this incredible power because he had Krishna behind him. You know, there's this saying, you know it well, I'm sure, is that Mare Krishna Rakeke, Rake Krishna Marike. If Krishna wants to kill you, knowing who can protect you, and if Krishna wants to protect you, who can kill you? You know. So we had this devotee who stayed here. I don't know if you were here at the time. He visited here, Sharaba. He has a whole story, which I'll have to tell another night, or we'll send it to you. But he had so many miracles. He had to walk. He was trying to get from Serbia to Croatia during the early 90s when there was a war going on. It was a horrific war, you know. And he was so determined. He was chanting all the time. He had read Bhagavad-gītā, but there was no temple where he was, and he had to get to a temple. So the people told him, no, you can't go. There's a war happening. You're going to get killed, you know. But he was saying, Mare Krishna Rakeke, Rake Krishna Marike. You know, if Krishna wants to protect me, no one can kill me. So he's chanting. He's walking, and finally he comes across a fire. A town had been all burned down, and there was a barn burning, you know, And then we saw a cow and a calf, and they seemed to be distressed, you know. So he was distressed, and he's called out, "Is anyone here? Anyone here?" And he heard click, click. There's two rifles pointing at him. And he heard that, he said, "Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna," and he started to run. And they were shooting, but they didn't hit him. He wasn't injured. It was miraculous. And then the next part of the story I'll tell you again, because we're running out of time. Even more miraculous. Point blank, he's lying on the ground, the guy shoots a rifle at him. He has nothing hard in his backpack, but somehow the bullet was deflected, missed him, hit a rock, and went right past the ear of another soldier. And he started berating the first soldier for trying to kill him, you know. And then he was you know, they interrogated him and everything, you know, but they ended up helping him, driving him. And then there's more miracles on the road where he's chanting in the back seat. And, you know, it's a war going on, so they check the papers very carefully. And these drivers, yeah, we're on the same side, and here's the papers. But they didn't even see him in the back. They looked at him, but he was invisible. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And somehow he got to, you know, he got there, and he lived here for a while, and now he's in Washington. He got COVID, but I think he recovered. He went to Hawaii. He stayed for a while. But it's just, yeah, his story is in Vijay's book. Vijay wrote a Sankirtan book, and this story is in there. Because what really inspired him was reading the Bhagavad-gītā. You know, he became very faithful, started chanting and everything. So these things are faith builders. There's all kinds of miraculous stories. Saul has a miraculous story. Every day is a miracle for him. He's inspiring everybody to just by soldiering on. All right, it's 8:10. Voice Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol. Oh, any questions from the Zoom line? Comments? Criticisms? Okay.
No questions, just thank you for a lovely class.
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol.
Is he going to visit anytime soon?
I'm sorry?
Is he going to visit anytime soon?
Oh, Sarabha? You know, he did visit here once. Did you see? Yeah, you remember? But I don't know. I'm going to have to contact him and see. Because he gets some time off. He's a Pujari there. But I'll have to see, because he did get COVID, so the situation could be changed.